I was a little disappointed we couldn't get into the Garden of Gethsemane at night. I understand why, but it's exciting to go back.
Yeah, they had a special prayer service going on. Being there in the daytime, we'll have even a better perspective. We'll be able to see things even clearer than we did last night.
It's such an emotional place. I mean, Jesus was so vulnerable when he was in the garden praying the night that he was arrested. I don't even know how to anticipate what that's going to be like to be there.
Jeremy, we've entered the courtyard of the Church of All Nations, which sits on the traditional location of the Garden of Gethsemane. This building was built in the 1920s, and it was built on top of the foundations of a 4th century Byzantine chapel and a 12th century Crusader basilica. In the 1st century, there was an oil press here. Of course, in Aramaic, the word Gethsemane means oil press. During the time of Jesus, this would have been the area where they would have crushed all of the olives that come from the olive trees from what we know as the Mount of Olives.
There's some cultural ideas about the various numbers of olive pressings. You'd put the olives in and you'd press it, and the first pressing went to this, and the second pressing went to this, and the third pressing would be used for this. And so the fact that Jesus was in an area known for its olive press, and that he prays and pours himself out under intense pressure 3 different times is very significant.
This was a place where he was known to go to for just some solitude. And so this is a place where on the night he was betrayed, he felt it was a good place for him to go and talk to his Father, and he carried some of the disciples there with him.
To be able to walk into a grove of olive trees, especially one as old as the one that we went to, is really special.
That whole area is really only about the size of half of a football field. If the church building or the olive trees aren't sitting in the exact location, it's very close.
Jesus prayed all through his life. Prayer was something special for him. He set aside time to make sure to communicate with the Father. This night was especially significant for him. It's just before his betrayal, it's just before his arrest. He comes here to pray 3 times to ask God if there's any way possible that he could avoid the cross and everything that went along with the cross. The Gospels tell us that Jesus prayed, that he had a habit of praying, that he would go off by himself to pray. But it's not very often that the Gospels give us the words of his prayers. And so to have those words on the eve of such a momentous day is really, really special. And then to understand that it was several times that he offered a very similar prayer. That's how intent he was on it. And the answer was given to him with the light of the torches coming down. The answer was no, this is the way. And he submitted himself to God's will. When he was done with that 3rd prayer, he gathered up his disciples and he made a statement. Matthew and Mark record it for us. He says, "Rise, let us be going, for my betrayer is at hand." Now, how does he know that?
Well, I think there's a possible explanation in John the 18th chapter. In verse 1, it says, "When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden where he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons." You remember when we were here last night and it was dark? Now picture yourself in that environment with regard to this passage. The gate that you see across the valley here is the Eastern Gate. Now that gate was built in the 6th century, but it sits on the foundations of an earlier gate. Now think about that, a band of soldiers with lanterns and torches coming in at night. Jesus could have easily looked across that valley and seen those people coming. He had the opportunity to do something, but he didn't. He stayed right here for you and me. And we don't know exactly which gate those soldiers came out, but that gate seems logical given its location. Jesus clearly would have seen them maybe for as much as 10 minutes before they arrived there in the Garden of Gethsemane. He would have had plenty of time to run.
Imagining what you're asking us to think about, the nighttime prayers, and being able to see those lit torches from the group that were coming up with weapons to arrest him. And then thinking about the journey that Jesus has already taken. He's already come from heaven, come to earth, taken on flesh. He came all the way down, but this was a trip that he easily could have made if he wanted to. When he saw the threat of danger coming, he could have run off. He could have gone to Bethany over across the top of the Mount of Olives. He could have gone to Bethphage. He could have gone back to Jerusalem. He could have done any number of things, but he didn't take that journey. He stayed and he allowed himself to be arrested and crucified.